Hello and welcome to the Tech and Sports podcast. Tech and Sports is a show about how technology is revolutionizing all the major sports as well as health and fitness. You can find it on your podcast service of choice. My name is Alex Coop and I'm here with the fantastically amazing Mandy Kovacs.
Hello.
This week, Mandy spoke with Carol Austin, the head of performance, support, and medical for Team Dimension Data and the 105th Tour de France race that started this past weekend. Plus all the biggest news from the last week, new apps or wearables, and your weekly concussion updates. But before we get to that, we would really appreciate it if you would review and rate Tech and Sports Podcast. We've been growing the show over the last few months, and we really appreciate all the support so far. And with that, sit back and relax because the Tech and Sports crew is entering the game.
All right, so we are going to start with World Cup news because the tournament is unfortunately almost over. Fox Sports has all the U.S. broadcasting rights to this year's World Cup and also the next two, and a lot of people thought this experiment would end up failing when the U.S. national team did not qualify for the tournament. But in fact, the broadcaster has actually seen a lot of success so far, especially online. So it's really put a lot of effort into content across all the major social media platforms like Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, and Instagram, and it's really paid off. So Fox's exclusive Twitter show called FIFA World Cup Now has racked up more than 5 million views so far, and its 90-second recap of every match, called 90 in 90, has seen more than 56 million views across social media. And on Snapchat, Fox's World Cup stories have pulled out more than 20 million unique viewers in the US, 70% of which are users under the age of 25, which is a really key demographic for the broadcaster. Snapchat is working so well that Fox actually created an entire new team dedicated to creating stories for the app. And I think this really proves that A, the World Cup is incredibly popular in the US, even without their national team in it, and doubling down on these digital platforms can really pay off if done well. So I think this is really just a good example for 2026 when North America hosts the tournament, which is very exciting for all of us that live here.
Yeah, that's going to be great. And I don't think they would have had this success if they would have just invested in the traditional forms of broadcasting. So obviously Twitter and Snapchat is critical to that kind of success. So that makes perfect sense that those platforms are contributing to these big numbers.
Absolutely. I mean, It's the way forward, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then in more World Cup news, we covered how McDonald's is streaming all of Sweden's matches in the country in every restaurant. And now the fast food giant has partnered with Google and a media agency called OMD to anticipate hungry moments. So essentially what this means is McDonald's will be using Google's real-time trigger and data management platform to anticipate the times during World Cup games when fans actually become hungry, and then it entices them to place orders for takeout or delivery online. So Google's real-time trigger allows advertisers to activate display and video campaigns based on predefined moments of events that correspond with when people get hungry. Using data, McDonald's and Google have found that most fans do get hungry at the beginning, halftime, and end of a game, or whenever a goal is scored. So the campaign pushes promotional messages out and also collects insights like favorite menu items to provide greater personalization and relevancy to the ads. I mean, I actually think this is amazing. I think this is such a funny but good idea. That's Mandy's hot take of the day.
Yeah, funny, scary. It's like advertising on steroids. It's just like...
But this advertising does exist already. We just don't know about it.
Yeah, it does. They're obviously just being much more upfront about it. It'll be cool to see something like this, maybe something a bit more healthier outside of McDonald's. But you know what? People love McDonald's and so do I. So it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, indeed. I definitely smelled it from your desk yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, and this morning too. I don't know.
Oh my God. Yeah, we really like McDonald's.
Yeah, especially their breakfast stuff. It's good.
All right. And then in less pleasant news, unfortunately, there's been a lot happening around broadcasting the World Cup in Australia. So one of the largest telecommunication companies in the country, Optus, won exclusive broadcast rights to this year's tournament. But after completely failing in the first couple games, the company has now ended up selling its rights to SBS, which is a broadcaster in Australia that has traditionally been home to the majority of soccer coverage for the last 30 years. So Optus was streaming the games online in for a subscription fee of $15 Australian dollars, but its coverage was terrible and there were a lot of technical glitches that basically made the first few games unwatchable on its platform. And so as a result, SBS has gotten all of its coverage back and is broadcasting the rest of the tournament. And I believe Optus is still showing some of the games, but it no longer has exclusivity, which is a big blow. And I mean, there's really not much else to say here, but at least in Australia, it looks like streaming platforms do have a ways to go. And then lastly, in soccer news, but that's not actually the World Cup, Facebook has secured the rights to stream the FIFA Champions League in Brazil for the next 3 years, starting in the 2018-2019 season. So Facebook has replaced Brazilian broadcaster Globo, which has had the rights to the league for many years, but decided not to renew its license this year, apparently for cost reasons and to keep the rights to South American soccer leagues. So one other broadcaster, Turner Sports, which is an American broadcaster, also has the rights to the Champions League in Brazil as well, and is rumored that they're going to negotiate with Facebook to share some of the broadcasting duties. So Facebook has been snapping up a number of broadcasting rights for a bunch of different sports, like soccer, obviously, baseball and football, and more across the world. So I really think this is just their next step to basically global domination. They're doing really well in this space.
Yeah, it's a bit of an extension from our previous story about Fox getting those broadcasting rights, and that agreement has social media websites written all over it, and they play a huge part. And obviously, Facebook is a major component of this agreement as well. So
absolutely,
yeah, social media is doing a lot in the broadcasting space.
They really are.
That's no secret, of course, but this just shows that pretty much every agreement now, when it comes to broadcasting, will involve some major social media company doing its thing.
Yeah. Okay, and then we're done with our soccer coverage, and next we're moving on to how the PGA Tour will be using artificial intelligence to enhance its coverage and storytelling. So the PGA has been experimenting with augmented and virtual reality over the last couple of years, and now it's moved on to AI. So the organization has teamed up with Microsoft to develop a content relevancy engine that's built on Microsoft's cloud platform Azure. So it'll use AI to sift through nearly 20 years of statistical data collected by the PGA Tour's scoring system, and of course more than 80,000 hours of video in its library to come up with real-time trends and storylines that might be relevant to current golf action. So the content relevancy engine will essentially provide contextual content for all TV broadcasts and online as well, so that fans have a better idea of some of the competitive situations that they might be watching. So, for example, at the Memorial Tournament in June, golfer Bryson DeChambeau was clinging to the lead in the final round when he missed a shot that left him almost 60 feet from the hole. But because of this tech, the broadcasters knew that in the past, this golfer had made the majority of shots in similar situations like that. And sure enough, his next putt, he made it and he won the tournament. So the PGA Tour is also working with two companies called WSC Sports and ShotLink to use AI to generate video and data highlight packages that can be shared on all digital platforms. So this process apparently used to take hours to produce and post, but it can now make multiple highlight videos, even player-specific or nationality-specific ones for distribution partners, in much less time. And I'm also not done. The PGA Tour is also using AI to automatically write recaps customized for every player in the field following every round of every tournament using Narrative Science's NLG platform called Quill. So this platform collects all the applicable stats and puts it into a quick story recap for online fans. And last but not least, I think we've covered this before as well, but the organization has also teamed up with Discovery Channel's parent company for what's being called the Netflix of golf. It's basically a dedicated multi-platform channel that's focused on golf and will be shared in virtual reality and live 360-degree video on Twitter.
Wow, that's a lot of news there.
It is a lot of news coming out of the PGA Tour today.
I don't watch golf, but I don't know what kind of notes broadcasters have on hand when they're calling the tournaments and stuff. But I mean, props to them for knowing, how to keep things interesting and to how to keep talking about the game that's unfolding ahead of them or in front of them. So with this new cloud platform, I imagine it's going to make their jobs a lot easier and make for some more interesting storytelling.
Well, I mean, watching golf is so boring as it is. And I know I'm totally going to get ripped apart by like golf fans and my uncle who sits and watches every single golf tournament possible.
Yeah.
And I just don't get it. But at least like when, you're adding like contextual stats to that, it makes it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe this will gain them more fans.
Possibly. Definitely. Well, Azure is doing phenomenal, so this is good for them as well.
Yeah, Microsoft is killing the cloud game, in case anyone didn't know.
Cool. Yeah, that's all very interesting, actually.
Okay, and then next we're moving on to the U.S. Open, which will become the first Grand Slam tournament to use electronic line calling for every single game this summer on all 16 of its courts. So this is a pretty big deal because while tennis has used electronic line calling platform Hawkeye technology for a number of years, it's never really been used consistently until now. So last year, for example, this technology was only used on the 4 main courts at the US Open and then for video review on a couple of others. But last year's experiment seemed to go really well and it must have impressed enough people because now it's taking over and being rolled out across the whole tournament. Apparently, this has been in the works for a few years, but it's been logistically difficult to implement. But in 2016, it really became possible because the U.S. Open's courts were rebuilt and all the necessary fibers, cables, and digital infrastructure were put in place to start the journey. So the 4 main courts will now have a dedicated instant replay team using the technology, but the other courts will have live feeds sent directly to a centralized office within the broadcast complex on the grounds where plays can then be reviewed. So every match will be watched by a review official and a technician, and they'll be able to listen to the chair umpire's microphone to determine the specific call that's being challenged. So when a player call is being contested by a player, the technician will locate the ball that's being challenged, and the review official will, of course, confirm that the technician is looking at the right moment, and then they'll make their decision and relay that back to the court, as well as broadcast it on the video scoreboard live. So the U.S. Open starts on August 27th in New York, so we will stay tuned to see how this goes.
Yeah.
I have high hopes.
High hopes, indeed. Hopefully this reduces the number of temper tantrums players on the tennis courts have. That's ultimately what I am.
Although I love those.
They are pretty entertaining sometimes. They do cross the line when they're threatening the referees, though.
That's true.
But sometimes that...
And who was the woman a couple weeks ago? She like freaked out and she ended up taking a whole chunk out of the umpire's chair. Like she actually destroyed it.
Yeah, that's right. Oh gosh.
It was some female like single tennis player. I can't remember her name, but it was funny.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Serena Williams has also gotten to a pretty hilarious spat with referees as well. So interesting.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, and then now our last story ties in perfectly with our discussion today, which is an interview with the head of performance of a Tour de France team. So the 105th Tour de France started on Saturday, July 7th, and a company called Dimension Data is teaming up with the race's organizer, Amory Sport Organization, to provide real-time speed and positioning data of all the riders during the grueling 21-stage racing event. So more than 150 million data points will be combined with real-time route, terrain, and weather conditions, as well as historical race and rider data to create highly accurate predictions for things like stage favorites, estimated arrival time at key points in the race, and when the peloton is likely to catch the breakaway group. So every rider has a tracking device on their bike that will connect to people behind the scenes to give each rider's latitude, longitude, and speed. All of this will be ingested into an Internet of Things platform, which will share it in real time with fans on official social media channels. So machine learning will also be used quite a bit to understand the race situation and ultimately help media broadcasters and journalists cover the race a little bit better and tell better stories during it. So there's a lot going on here, and while I don't usually watch the Tour de France, if I'm being honest, all of these insights actually might get me interested. I think they're pretty cool. I'm interested in seeing the outcome, like how stories will get better, potentially get better as a result of the tracking tech. And I'm really interested to see what your discussion, what kind of discussion you're going to have later today. Yeah, Carol is awesome.
Yeah.
Everyone stay tuned for that.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, now we are moving on to our new apps and wearables section. Coop, take it away.
That's right. So tennis star icon Serena Williams kicked Wimbledon off by partnering with Snapchat in order to offer users a chance to take her on through the app in a virtual tennis match. Although it's not exactly her playing behind the phone. It's a virtual version of Williams, but she is apparently very tough. So kind of a pretty spot on replication of the real Serena Williams. Apparently, Bitmoji-Serena is so good that even Serena, the real Serena, has a hard time beating her.
That's amazing.
It's pretty interesting. All you have to do to play this is to, through the app, press your screen until lenses appear on either side of the camera, and then swipe through the filters until you see a tennis ball marked with an S for Serena, obviously, and then you can start playing. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, I might actually go and play this.
Yeah. If you win, let me know, because
I doubt I will.
that's
My tennis days are past me.
It's a rare occurrence if someone wins. Yeah, and then moving on. Scientists at Park, a research and development company owned by Xerox, are developing a mouthguard that can help athletes understand their bodies, their physiology during exercise, and better inform them during training. So Park's idea was to create a mouthguard with the ability to measure saliva, and which ultimately leads to understanding how a player is functioning during exercise, during training, during actual games. Park is partnered up with NextFlex and the University of California in San Diego to make this happen. And it's received funding from the federal government. And its role, and it's also partnering with a manufacturer focused on flexible hybrid electronics. And that company's role in this project is to improve the manufacturability and usability of the device. And after all this, the result was a prototype electronic plastic foil sensor that fits inside the actual mouthguard. So it's still a prototype, obviously, but the sensor can produce real-time data with a usable life of around 18 hours. And the device, according to a couple stories, recently completed a period of performance testing. And the next step is to work out actual specific use cases and hopefully get some real customers and some sales. So pretty interesting stuff there.
Yeah, that's quite fascinating. I don't think we've ever covered someone that's been using saliva for this type of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like we've seen a lot of blood tests, a lot of eye tests even, but nothing along these lines. So I'm excited to see how it works.
Yeah, and Flex Tech is sort of up and coming and not quite perfected. So this is an interesting use case for that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then our last story here, which actually kind of works for a concussion discussion, but we thought we'd throw it in here. Former Washington Redskins Sean Springs has been busy since he walked away from the game in 2010, developing a new product, or basically developing a new company. Spring, since he left the NFL, has been using all his resources and his contacts to develop a company called WIM Pact, which is in the early stages of development, and it's based in Leesburg, Virginia, and he's the founder and executive chief of that company. And the company's it's a small one with big ambitions. It wants to crack the market serving athletes, soldiers, recreational facilities, and workplaces, anywhere basically where people are at risk from blows to the head and or body. Springs has cited that head injuries were a problem for him in the league. He had been hit with 13 seasons. He played for 13 seasons in the NFL, and throughout his career sustained various hits to the head and head traumas. So as a result, he decided to form WIM Pact. And at the moment, the company has 15 products in the pipeline and is tackling towards a $1 million in revenue, is hoping to rack up $1 million in revenue this year. And WIM Pact recently signed a 2-year, $600,000 contract with the U.S. Army as well to develop padding for combat helmets. It's got a bunch of stuff in the works, and it's hoping that the technology will find applications, like I said, from everything from cycling to the military to recreational facilities. And final note, through extensive testing, basically the company is developing products that absorb and disperse impact energy within existing helmets. So it's not it's not something that's already built into the helmet. It's stuff that you can add into helmets on your own and kind of customize them. So it's kind of going about it a little bit differently, but it's pretty interesting, and it seems to be taking off.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah. So that's it for our new apps and wearables section. Moving on to our concussion update. On the Dan Patrick Show, NASCAR driver Dale Earnhardt touched on his own experiences with head trauma and discussed kind of how he felt and sort of the aftermath of various head traumas he sustained while driving, which he sustained several concussions throughout his career. In addition to his 2016 concussion, he suffered 2 others during the 2012 season, and he has pledged to donate his brain to science in 2016 prior to his season-ending injuries. So he was on the show to talk about his book, and he also touched on the sort of common discussions around concussions, specifically when it comes to when the symptoms go away and you think you're okay, and then you sort of jump back into things. So he really delved into that, talking about how after he would think he was okay, he would be racing, and then minor collisions against the wall or minor collisions against with another vehicle almost immediately led to him being sidelined for multiple days. So
wow.
He shed light on that, and it was a pretty interesting discussion. So I thought that was worth noting. And then moving on to FIFA. This is a follow-up to a recent story which we discussed last week about concussion bins. Doctors in the Premier League were hoping to implement concussion bins, which basically allowed a suspected player with a suspected concussion to basically get a doctor to check out the player and basically bring the game to a bit of a standstill. And anyway, FIFA has ruled out that concussion bins being introduced to football is just a big no, according to its chairman of its medical committee. The Daily Telegraph revealed this story, and like I said, the doctors were pushing for teams to be allowed to make temporary substitutions for up to 10 minutes while players who took a blow to the head were being assessed by medics. And Michel Dou, the chairman of the medical committee for FIFA, said it's unlikely that this would ever be implemented because he believes that the system would be abused by managers and coaches and players. And just a reminder that the Premier League is a member association of FIFA, so that's why this isn't going to happen. If FIFA says no, then it's not going to happen elsewhere. Yeah, I mean, he's right. They would definitely abuse something like this.
Yeah. I brought that issue up last week or whenever we talked about it, right? That it probably would be abused by people.
Yeah.
But I also think it's stupid because I don't think FIFA is doing enough to address concussions. Mind you, they happen a lot less frequently in soccer, I think, than in hockey or football.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it is still an issue.
It is. I mean, at this point, they just have to try and treat it like any other injury. So if a player has a suspected concussion, even after all the substitutions have been made, because you only have a limited number of subs, then, if a player, just like if a hamstring pops, and that player goes down, then you just play with a man down and you just take that player out and assess that player for a concussion. If it seems like it's that serious, then that seems just like the only option right now. Yeah. I'm not too surprised that they said no to this new recommendation, but they sort of already have a system in place, and it would quickly be abused. So,
maybe they'll come up with something better.
Perhaps, we'll keep an eye on that. All right, now moving on to our discussion portion. Mandy was able to chat with Carol Austin, the head of performance, support, and medical for the Tour de France's team, Dimension Data. She was able to go in depth about how the team is using technology like AI and IoT and how it's using data to improve its performance. So let's hear what she had to say.
So to kick things off, Dimension Data is an official technology partner of the Tour de France and also sponsors the team that you're head of performance for. So why don't we start there? How are you using technology to train and improve your team's performance? Like, what does Dimension Data bring to that?
So I think our team has always, really leveraged technology for the benefit. We come out of Africa and we've had to step up to the world tour. And that's been essentially a 10-year process for us. We've used technology from the very, very beginning with the power meters that we've used to benchmark our riders and what level of performance they need to, and training they need to essentially bridge the gap between, riding in Africa and riding successfully in Europe. So we've always been very much a tech-focused, modern, non-traditional, and the sport is very traditional and Eurocentric. We've always taken an alternative approach. And I think in terms of partnering with Dimension Data, it's really taken it to a new level. We've brought in some new technology like the FIFA app, which we built within, which was used to, connect the riders and the management on a daily basis, provide us with more feedback in terms of how each rider is feeling, where they are located, because this is very much a virtual team and a virtual business where we are distributed across the world. At the moment, we're predominantly in Europe, but at times we're spread across from Asia through to the USA, and really connecting everyone together is a challenge. Without IT, we wouldn't be able to do that. And whether it's on traditional platforms like email and WhatsApp, and we also have specific platforms. Training Peaks has been part of our team structure since the get-go. So that's a US-based team or US-based software offering, and our riders, wherever they are in the world, they use Garmin to collect the data from their bicycles, heart rate, power, distance, time, altitude. That data is transported into the cloud and then analyzed by our coaches who are all based in Italy. And essentially, we've had a really interesting project. We've had this objective data available to us for some time now, but we've never been really able to assess the subjective factors which are important, how the rider's feeling, how good their sleep is, what their motivation levels are. And so in the past year, we've developed an app with Dimension Data, which helps us on a daily basis to track that and push the data into our comprehensive database. So those are just, some examples of what we're doing with Dimension Data. It also helps us to get earlier alerts to any medical issues that might be occurring, as well as things like technical issues where the riders are out, they're out training and perhaps they've got a mechanical problem with their bike which is interfering with their ability to train, or even the weather, and then our coaches are able to immediately adjust. So I think the technology really helps us to respond more quickly and effectively as a virtual team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned the app that your team had developed along with Dimension Data. Can you explain that a little bit more and what it does and how you're using it?
Yeah, so we developed this app, and essentially the goal was to create a very simple app that in 2 minutes could capture key parameters that are important in terms of health and performance. So we, first of all, just need to know where our riders are located, because we are a very mobile team. There are 28 riders on the team. We're frequently involved in at least 2 race programs, overlapping race programs, sometimes 3. So it means we're actually racing around 250 days of the year, and just pretty much knowing where every rider is located is a big challenge for us. And then we're looking at things like how they're perceived, and all the data they push into a database, which houses our objective data, which is simply collected from their Garmin devices. So it really reflects the load. While the information we're getting from the FIFA app, which Dimension Data has helped us with, to develop, gives us an impression of their response to the load and how they're feeling. And essentially, as I said, it's also an early warning system for us in 2 manners. So if there's a direct issue, we're picking it up more quickly. So our riders are completing the questionnaire every morning. If they're experiencing a sore throat or, feeling mildly ill, we get to know about that sooner rather than later. For us, every lost day of training and every lost day of racing is significant in terms of performance over the season. So finding out that the riders are ill sooner rather than later is a very good thing for us, because we can then address it in terms of maybe changing the training or even medical intervention. So we're just able to be more responsive. We're also looking over time at these other parameters that I mentioned, sleep and mood and motivation and how they're feeling in their training, to really identify where we may be overloading them. It's quite difficult, I think, sometimes in professional sport. You're always wanting to push to the very edge, but not over the edge. I think it's very important to therefore have an idea of what the actual loading is in terms of, as I say, objective data, and compare it to what the rider is experiencing and where they're at. So we use it from both perspectives to optimize the training and the preparation of our riders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of touches on my next question. What do your riders think about using so much technology? Because, I do feel like the sports industry as a whole is kind of split right now, where some people see the value of so much technology and tracking all the data, but then there are others that say there's too much tech in sports. So where do your riders fall on that spectrum?
I think it's a very valid question, and I think, we've been very selective, like in the app that we've built, in choosing a few parameters, because I think one can collect too much information and not necessarily information that's perceived to be valuable to a rider. So in terms of the subjective data, it's very, very simple now for them to, upload a training file. That takes a matter of kind of 2 seconds off their phone and essentially just syncing their device. On the other side, putting the questionnaires can be quite onerous. And if they see the value in the data, they're simply not going to do it. And I think, that's why we aim to ensure that this app could be completed within a 2-minute period. We looked at a lot of other apps that are available in the general market. And, many of them are too extensive, and our riders simply wouldn't have completed them. They just take too much time and effort. But we found that with this app, it's been quite well accepted in that the riders will see the benefit of the data being centralized, so the subjective data pushing into their other database so they can look at trends over time. And also, I think the reactivity of our doctors, so if there is a medical issue and they report it, they get a call pretty much immediately, and they feel well attended to, so they're getting something out of the data. And I think that's what's really important in any sport, is what is the value you're bringing to the individual rider rather than just collecting this data.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And now I know the Tour de France this year hasn't started yet, but you've been using this technology for a little while now. What sort of feedback have you gotten, in your training or practices? Like, are you seeing it improving your performance?
I think we're still kind of in an early phase with the app, and I think, like any data set, before you can really, see the benefit, you need to collect quite a lot of data. So we're hoping by the end of the season, we may be able to do some analytics. It also depends on how compliant the riders are on an individual basis. But I think where we have seen an immediate benefit is, as I say, on the medical front, where the riders previously might leave a cough or a cold for a few days before asking for help. Now, because we're prompting them every morning to, report, there's definitely an improved communication with our medical team, and with our audit app, that's very, very helpful in terms of then addressing any issues that come up and trying to get the riders back to good health. So, yeah.
Okay. And then I guess my last question is just looking forward. Do you foresee using any additional technology to help performance? Is there technology that you want to use but you currently don't right now?
I think there's massive opportunity in terms of technology, and whether it's we've got partnerships with companies that have built software and technology around improving aerodynamics and testing the aerodynamics. There's, medical technology that's out there. I think there's absolutely a lot more opportunity, and I think where we're going is very exciting. I see more and more opportunity to capture data. I think the question is just how we integrate that and use it in terms of better understanding what's happening with the individual. So I think it's kind of, we are very interested and looking forward to capturing more data, and then the potential of the predictive analytics and artificial intelligence and machine modeling. But I think that's kind of in process. So we definitely, as a team, we see the opportunity there and are very excited. So,
Great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure.
Well, that's it for today's episode. Thanks to everyone who listened to us. This is episode 51, so we're almost at a year. So thank you to everyone who has helped us get this far. It's been amazing. I also wanted to mention that while we've also been putting out a daily version of our episodes for the last couple months, we've unfortunately decided to stop this just for a couple different reasons. So thank you to everyone who listened to us that way, and sorry to everyone who listened to us that way. But we're probably going to stick with our weekly show only from now on. So I apologize to anyone who that might affect. But hey, our weekly version, when it's all at once, is probably better anyways.
Yeah, you don't, if you're busy and you can't listen to the whole thing at once, just pause it. And
there's a pause button for a reason.
Yeah, you can just tune in whenever you want.
Exactly. So you can follow us on Twitter at ITB Tech and Sports, or our personal accounts at Mandy V. Kovacs, and It's Just Alex Coop. So once again, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.